V is for values, which is taking a moment to actually think about, well, what is most important to me and why am I here? And what really does matter? Does this Excel spreadsheet really matter?
So welcome to Unleash Learning TV and radio. Now, if your school is working to move from good to great by unleashing your team's teaching potential, well-being, both teacher and student well-being, plays an important role in that mission. In fact, when Unleash Learning comes to a school, it empowers schools to develop teachers and students' well-being in service to teaching and learning. So to help us think about how all this fits together, we've got Daniela Falecki back on the show. Now, you know her as the founder of Teacher Wellbeing, and her new book is out, Thrive, which is practical strategies to nourish teacher well-being. And at the end of the episode, we've got a free copy to mail one of our lucky viewers. Here we go. My friend Daniela, welcome to Unleash Learning TV.
Hello, William. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
So we've got some exciting news. We'll talk about the exciting news for a second. In a second. Yeah, you got yours. So we wanted this episode because we've been talking this forever, but in a delivery model of education, who the teacher is does not matter. It's just dumping information. But if we want to make learning stick for everyone, we know the science. And we know that teacher well-being and student well-being serve that system in very specific ways. And my doctoral research shows that, lots of researchers show that, and then your new book helps us think about that. So that's why we want to talk to you. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's one of those things that was in my head for about 10 years and then took about 3 years to write. Had to go through different publishers, finish the manuscript. A publisher went bankrupt. I went, oh no! Thankfully, it was picked up by Amber Press, and here it is. And I couldn't be prouder of it.
Super exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting.
So I want to start with the first question I really want to talk about. Now, this gets me in trouble when I say this, and I know the spirit with which I'm saying this, but I mean, I always remember my doctoral professors talking about this, is that schools are not well-being organizations, they're teaching and learning organizations, and they impact well-being both positively and negatively. So when we talk about teacher well-being in the context of teaching and learning, you know, on page 1, you talk about this. I've read the book. I'm halfway through. For audience, why does teacher well-being serve a teaching and learning organization?
Fabulous question. And I agree, actually, that schools are teaching and learning institutions. The component that we really need to come back to is that schools are learning institutions with human beings at the center. And teachers and students are human beings at that center. And we need to prioritize student well-being and student learning because that is definitely our core business. But it's another human being that's doing that or contributing to that. And we know that relationships matter. Schools were set up, as we know, in the industrial age to help people learn how to function in a production line. You had input, output was measured. That language hasn't really changed in schools where we've got curriculum, what students need to learn, and we measure the outcomes. What has changed is we now differentiate, we do all these different things to cater for diverse student needs, as we should. What hasn't changed is how teachers are treated and how teaching happens for teacher learners or adult learners. And unfortunately, schools still operate in an industrial model with the expectations of teachers and how they're expected to be at work, but we have adapted for students. So my message around well-being for teachers is let's put the human at the center with teachers included in that conversation. And let's also remember that we're not in an industrial age anymore. In fact, we've moved through an information age to now a relationship age.
It also mirrors the science of learning, which is, you know, what my background is. So it's a perfect connection to that. I want to talk about the question I had, which I know always comes up. We've talked a lot about it, but where's the responsibility between the teacher's responsibility for well-being and the collective? So in the book, you talk a lot about really the, if you will, literacy of well-being, which once you've got that, then maybe you're more responsible for it, but and also for the school side. So where is the balance between that, Daniela?
Absolutely. I think what's really important for people and educators to understand is to start having different conversations about what well-being at work means. My company is called Teacher Wellbeing, but I try not to use the word well-being at all. And in fact, when I'm running a workshop with schools, I will say, take the word well-being, put a line through it, and right underneath it, energy. Because
Mm,
what we're talking about when we're talking about educator well-being is we're talking about educator energy. And
mm,
that energy is to do with social energy in our interactions, mental energy with cognitive fatigue, emotional energy of trying to navigate people's emotions and self-regulate ourselves at the same time. And then we've got our physical energy, which is eat, sleep, and exercise. So when we have an understanding of what is well-being at work, which is basically in short term how I feel and how I function at work, in the context of how much energy I have to do what I need to do, then we can start to have better conversations. So the first question is, what is well-being at work? The second question is, who is responsible for my
mm,
well-being at work? And I have a model in here that I talk about that I call me, we, and us.
mm.
And it's about recognizing the reciprocal layers or the ripple effect of my decisions. For example, what time I went to bed last night. And now I went to bed late. I now have woken up maybe not as energized as I would like to be. I'm now a little bit more cranky. I go to work and now I'm not my best self with my colleagues, which impacts the relationships. And now I've forgotten to go to playground duty, which now impacts the us, which is the system.
Yeah.
And so we've got all these decisions playing out with me, we, and us. And when we understand the reciprocal nature of that, then we can start to recognize that actually well-being at work is a shared responsibility between my decisions, the relationships I form, and organizational demand.
Fantastic. It reminds me a lot about how much, we talk a lot about leadership from the inside out or teaching from the inside out.
Yeah.
When Unleashed Learning gets to a school to learn how to make learning stick. And it reminds me again about that structure, but also how much we have to know ourselves in that. So I'm looking at my notes because I want to ask the question correctly. I have been doing this for a long time and I've interviewed thousands of educators and I ask them about like who's made the biggest impact on their lives. And they often will tell me about the person, but sometimes can't remember what the subject was. And so, which I think reminds us who the teacher is matters, right? So it does matter who we are in this because people are remembering who we are. And in the book, you talked about those fertilizers. Now that could come across the wrong way, the way I'm saying it, but I know what the spirit of the book, the fertilizers that can help us thrive. So can you briefly talk about some of those fertilizers if we have such a big impact that people remember who we are? That's what actually sticks. So what are some of those fertilizers you talk about in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is in two parts, if you like. The first part is the what and why. So what is educator wellbeing? And I talk about what I just explained then, and who is responsible for it. Then the why because we feel devalued, we feel underappreciated. And then the second part of the book is, well, how? Now, what do I do now? And so Thrive is an acronym, and I call them the fertilizers of wellbeing, if you like. Thrive is T is time. So we need to shift the narrative around time, and time is the currency we use in education. We'll say, how much time will this cost me? How much time will it give me? So we need to explore what's my relationship with time, and how do I feel about it? I always saying I don't have enough time to do everything, which is a common phrase that we use. So time is really important to consider. The next one is head, which is thinking about how do you talk to ourselves? What's your metacognition? What are the records that you're playing in your mind that perhaps might be hurtful or harmful? Because sometimes our inner critic is not our friend at times. The R is for relationships. We know connection matters and who are your support through. The I is for impact. We do phenomenal work. And if I feel undervalued and underappreciated, and I'm working so hard to the point where my own self-care is deteriorating, am I celebrating the impact? Am I noticing the phenomenal work that I'm putting in? Or am I just on a treadmill pushing, always for the next thing and never taking a moment to celebrate or actually appreciate and feel valued myself? So that's the I, which is impact. And then the V is for values, which is taking a moment to actually think about, well, what is most important to me and why am I here? And what really does matter? Does this Excel spreadsheet really matter? Like, how important is color coding on my folders in this particular time? So just taking a moment to step back into what is the authentic me and my values. And then the E, of course, is for emotions. Managing my own emotions. We have to put this mask on of professionalism, as we should, but where is the space for me to be emotional? Where's the space for me to be passionate, to be excited, to be energized, to be proud? as well as giving myself permission to say, actually, I can't be my best self today. I don't want to. I want to hide away. I want to curl under the covers, and I'm allowed to do that without the guilt. They're the fertilizers, the 6 fertilizers, and I explain each of them in 6 chapters. And in each chapter, I give people 6 different activities for each of those different parts of the acronym.
It just reminds me once again, because, I talk about this all the time, is that the pedagogical approach impacts how we see these questions. So if it's just about delivering information, but the science of how learning actually sticks,
Yeah,
who the teacher is, who the students are matters, the whole system for it. And as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about so many of the educators that I've worked with, the leaders who say it's really disorienting because I'm doing school the way school was done to me
yeah,
until we interrupt this. So this helps interrupt the kinds of ways we think about pedagogy is what it makes me think about. I want to just do a couple quick questions here, and I'm going to jump about the strengths piece. And I think a lot of people know about the strengths, but if they don't, would you just briefly talk about strengths approaches, and also this idea about overplaying, underplaying strength? Now, we've had so many guests talk about this, but I think in the context of teacher well-being, it's a good one to talk about, please.
yeah. Look, absolutely. So if we look at in here, I talk about different ways that people feel. So people feel disconnected, feel disengaged, they get detached, they feel a dutifulness. We feel disappointed, we feel devalued, or we feel demoralized. And what drives that is this lack of appreciation or lack of feeling valued. But when we do an exercise where we talk about, well, what are the strengths and what are the things that make you amazing? We struggle with the language to be able to articulate that. So what Martin Seligman, Chris Peterson, and a number of other researchers from the field of positive psychology have spent years creating what we call the character strengths, and there are 24 character strengths. And what it does is it gives us a language to see the good parts of ourselves. Because as we know as educators, our natural default is to give, and we're not very good at receiving. So even though we want to feel appreciated and valued, when someone says something nice to us, it says, oh my gosh, the way that you displayed honesty or teamwork or bravery or courage or leadership, we tend to, when good stuff happens, we put up our hand and we say, no, no, that's just the job. And then we walk away and we cry in the corner. And when good stuff happens, we don't necessarily know how to receive it. So I work really hard with educators to say, you're allowed to be proud of yourself. You're allowed to see the good parts of yourself. And here is some language to help you see the specks of gold that live inside you.
Fantastic. Can I just say a side note about this, and then we'll go to the next question? But I've been in Australia for 17 years, and one of the things a colleague, when I was at Charles Church, came in the office and said, William, you compliment people all the time. And I'm like, well, yeah, what's the big deal? And she said, really politely, we don't really do that here. And I said, what do you mean? And she said,
It's
now look,
really
I hope I don't get in trouble here. In Australia, like, we don't really, it's kind of like you gotta be over the top if you did well. And what I've noticed in Australia is there isn't normative culture of celebrating success, and people go like this with it, and yet we need it so desperately. So when I
absolutely.
do that, I'm a little bit careful how I do it so I don't flip people out.
Oh, absolutely. I call it the appreciation paradox,
Yeah.
where we actually we desperately want to feel valued and appreciated, but when it comes, we don't know what to do with it.
Yes.
The fact that I even talk about that, it bubbles to the surface,
Yeah.
because as educators, we're a little bit cheeky, or we tend to we have the tall poppy syndrome, but we tend to
Yes.
be a bit sort of cheeky with each other. And if you're seen as being too up, we're going to
Yes.
cut you down because it's funny.
Yeah.
And I sort of say to educators that level of banter, absolutely okay. And I love that level of banter. But with a capital B, there needs to be a space for that vulnerability conversation, which is the authentic part to say, I see you and I validate you with my open heart. When we have those conversations, that's gold and magic. But so we need to have the space for both.
It reminds me again, what's the individual responsibility and the collective
Yep.
responsibility. I want to jump into which you've alluded to, because it's the cognitive, the thinking stories that we had. I wrote a piece about I'm glad I'm a bad teacher that got a lot of traction, which was really about that kind of inner critic that you say, or I say the shadow piece. So can you talk about the shadow, or you talk about the shadow thinking in the book. Can you give us an example about that's where the metacognition comes in, because checking it. So I
Oh,
want to just
absolutely.
bring that forward in from your book.
Absolutely. I talk about 6 thinking traps. The classic one is the fuss pot. And the fuss pot is the person that stays up to 1 o'clock in the morning to make sure that all their fonts are the right size when no one really cares. And and then we've got the fixer. The fixer is the person that's got to, go in there and just, well, I'll do it. And
Yeah.
then they go home and say, I don't know why I'm doing everything. And then you've got the fantasizer. The fantasizer is the person that has a to-do list that's 2 pages long, despite having a full teaching day. And then at the end of the day says, see, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Then you've got the faker. The faker is the person that you see them and you say, are you okay? And they say, I'm fine. It's like, well,
Fine.
you don't look fine. You're rocking in a corner over there. And then we've got the fault finder. And the fault finder is the person that walks around saying, well, whose fault's that? I didn't get told that.
Mm.
Did you get told that? Whose fault's that? And with these thinking traps, I say we need to just catch them. They're not right or wrong. But what I say, take the words right and wrong and just put those words in the bin. And what's more helpful is to ask, are these thoughts helpful or harmful in this particular time? Because if we go back to the fuss pot, if you're constructing a letter that's going home to parents, it needs to be accurate. But at what point is it helpful and at what point is it harmful? If you're the faker, sometimes you have to suck it up and carry on. But at what point is it helpful and harmful? And it's like the little continuum that I use. The fantasizer, great to have ambitions, great to have dreams and fuzzy big goals to have. But at what point is it helpful and harmful? Then the fixer, we need to just get in there and help people. We need to advocate for people that can't advocate for themselves. But at what point is it helpful and harmful? And so it's a matter of just catching those thoughts. But in the busyness of a school day, we don't get time to stop. And often when I'm running a workshop with a school, I'll say, this is an opportunity for us to do 3 things. Number 1, stop. Number 2, reflect. And
Yes.
number 3, to actually connect with each other in meaningful, authentic ways where we move from exhausted to feeling energized in a very short time.
Fantastic. I think the reason for those questions too, until they read your book, and is just thinking through some of these collective individuals and really the literacy around well-being. And also from our standpoint, it serves the ways we're making learning stick for everyone. It's not something else that we need to do, because who the teacher is matters and who it is. So let me do some quick fire questions.
Do it.
And these are like, boom. Okay.
Cool.
Daniela, a favorite teacher?
I'm PE by train, so my favorite teacher was my PE teacher. Her name was Nola Hitchens. She's married now. I don't know what it is. I'm going back 30 years, so I don't know what her name is now, but she was a hero to me.
Fantastic. Person who most impacted your learning history?
I need a book to include all the names, but the person that comes to mind is not someone I know personally, but is a great teacher of mine, Caroline Mace, Myss.
I know
I'm a
her.
big fan of Caroline. She's real. She's a theologian, a mystic, a medical intuitive. And what I love is the work around energy. How thoughts influence energy, energy influence thoughts. I've often referred to her, and she's my go-to when I need better thinking in my own mind.
She's in our courses. I've met her many, many times.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, many, many times. And the last question is, of all the things you teach, what is the one concept or idea you want to stick for everyone?
Teacher, you are a human being, not a human doing.
We'll end it with that. What we're going to do, Daniela, is you gave us an extra copy, so we're going to send one off to somebody after this episode. They'll see how to get it. Yeah, and Daniela, wickedly congratulations. Is wickedly a word? Wickedly congratulations. It's such a big deal, and thank you for the work you do for so many.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, William, and thank you to everybody listening. Thank you.
So now we want to hear from you, and our question is this. What's one thing either you do to support your own well-being or your school does to impact teacher well-being as a whole? So jump over to the Unleashed Learning, magical land of Unleashed Learning, and join the conversation. And our team is going to pick the best comment, and that person we will mail the book to for free anywhere you are in the world.